Sio Nagata, Adrienne Keene Doado, Chichalagi, Daloniga Adela, Jutla, Ginela. Hi everyone, I'm Adrienne Keene. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and I'm originally from Southern California. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to the New School and to all the organizers for having me out. I am completely honored and humbled to be a part of this amazing event. So what I'm going to talk with you tonight is kind of set the stage for talk about representations and how through my work with my blog, which is called Native Appropriations, and other activists in this area, we've been able to push back of images and stereotypes of Native peoples and make some actual change in those arenas. So to start, I'm going to show you a bunch of images. My presentation is very image heavy. I'm just going to inundate you with a bunch of pictures. But I want to go through some of the things that, these were the things that I saw in my everyday life. These were the things that were really problematic to me. These were things that inspired my blog and things that I write about today. So I want to kind of set the stage with a lot of these images. So first up, right here we have, these are from Urban Outfitters. Urban Outfitters had a Navajo line of clothing, which I'll talk more about and Jessica's going to talk about as well. But these are Navajo socks, a Navajo flask, and Navajo hipster panties. This is a sacred headdress on a skull on a hipster. This is Lego, sexy Native American Indian costume. I write a lot about costumes in plain Indian, especially around Halloween. The Tonto and Lone Ranger controversy as of late. I've written a lot about that. There's another example from Hollywood. This is from Peter Pan. There's that lovely song, What Makes the Red Man Red? Stanford Indians. I went to Stanford undergrad, and we used to be the Indians until 1971, and then the mascot was changed due to student activism. So Indian mascots is a big thing that is out there, and I'm going to talk more about that too, but this is something that I focus on as well. There's Khloe Kardashian in a headdress. This is a slide I forgot to take out when I did a presentation for junior high kids. That was real good. But hipster headdress trend is something that I have kind of cataloged on the blog, and it's just been baffling to me. This comes from a book that teaches little kids how to play Indian, everything from how to make traditional quote-unquote outfits out of paper bags to a teepee. Cherokee red soda, firewater whiskey, a teepee for your cat, baking soda, crazy dentist game on your iPhone, Eskimo Joe's restaurant in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and then this one, because those are kind of silly, but this one really hits home. This is a box of fireworks called Trail of Tears, and it has an image of the Trail of Tears, and for those of you who don't know, that is the forced removal of my people, of the Cherokee, from our historic homelands in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, where we were forced to walk all the way to Oklahoma. So to see that on a box of fireworks is problematic to say the least. And this is something that has popped up more recently too in the sports world. Here's a sign from a high school in Alabama, I think, that says, "Hey Indians, get ready to leave in a Trail of Tears round 2. So as you can see, these images are everywhere, and they cross kind of every realm of pop culture, of media, of things that are just in our face constantly. And when I went to undergrad, when I was out in California, I was lucky enough that our campus had a really great Native community. It was big, it was really supportive, there were always other Native folks around. And we also host one of the biggest powwows on the West Coast, so there's kind of a knowledge, at least around campus, that Indians actually exist and that we're a part of the campus community and that we're real people and that all of those sorts of things. And when things would pop up, the administration would swoop in and would support the Native students. I moved out to the east, and for the first time in my life, I was the only Native person. And I've been the only Native student in my program for the last 5 years. And I met other students and classmates and administrators and people who fully did not realize that there were still Native people alive. And so I started to get really upset about it. And so one day, I went for a walk and ended up in Urban Outfitters. This is my very first post that I ever put on the blog, just cute. It is all black and emo, I guess, but so I went into Urban Outfitters and I was walking through the store, and it was just the very start of the tribal trend. So there were these like neon dream catchers and teepee t-shirts and totem pole jewelry stands and all these things, and something kind of clicked, and I realized that the reason my classmates thought that Indians didn't exist and couldn't understand that I was a Native person and that why I cared so deeply about these issues, were these were the only type of images they ever saw of Native people, were those images that I showed at the beginning, were the images in Urban Outfitters. So I started the blog as a place to kind of just catalog it all. It really was just going to be this place where I could throw the images and be like, hey, I saw this today, this is a problem. But I didn't really have the language yet to talk about it. I didn't know why it was wrong. I didn't know why it was hurtful, why it was problematic. And I've learned. So that's where the blog started. This is where it is today. 283 posts later, I definitely now feel confident in pushing back against these images. And I also talk more about just my experiences as a contemporary Native person as well, are mixed in there as well. But outside of the blog, it's also grown into this really robust community online. So there's over 40,000 fans of the blog on Facebook, and this community has become really amazing too. So when you have all these people who are interested in issues of representation, are caring deeply about the ways that Native people are represented, then when something happens, we can mobilize that support and things happen and change happens, and it's really exciting. So I'm gonna fly through like 10 examples really fast just to show you some of the things that in the last 4 or 5 years, I guess only 4 years, I've been blogging for 4 years, have happened. So to start, there's that Urban Outfitters case that I showed you, the panties and the flask. Urban Outfitters had over 24 products named Navajo, and the Navajo Nation actually owns trademarks on the word Navajo associated with clothing and with garments. So they sent a cease and desist letter to Urban Outfitters and were like, hey, you can't use the name Navajo. And that got picked up by social media, by the internet, and kind of went viral, and there were news reports about it everywhere. And Urban Outfitters came back and said, you know what, we don't really care. Navajo is kind of a generic term, and it's been something that's been cycling through fashion for years, so we're not gonna do anything about it. So then the Navajo Nation said, well, here you go, here's a lawsuit. So that's a really interesting example of the ways that social media was able to draw attention to this, and this is still something that is working its way through the court system now. Then Gap had this lovely shirt that says Manifest Destiny across the top, and when this got posted, social media kind of exploded and people were really upset about it, and the designer tweeted out, Manifest Destiny, survival of the fittest, which was probably not the right thing to tweet out. So then everyone, again, got really upset. There was a lot of tweeting, of emailing, of posting, and then Gap pulled the controversial shirt and issued an apology. No Doubt had a video called Lookin' Hot, and it was up for just a second before everyone was like, hey, maybe you shouldn't dress up as Indians and ride around for your music video, or maybe you, Gwen Stefani, shouldn't dress as a Native woman and be chained up and pretend that there's violence happening against you. Like, these are things that are really, really problematic for our communities. And within a day or so, No Doubt pulled the video down and issued an apology. Then this was Victoria's Secret. Karlie Kloss was in a headdress and a super traditional buckskin and leopard print bikini. And it's a nice combo there too of the plains headdress with some Navajo style jewelry, and then I don't even know where the leopard comes from. But this was something that they posted the stills from the show online before the show had even aired, and everyone was like, hey, that's a problem. And so then Victoria's Secret apologized over Twitter and online and said that they weren't going to show it in the TV broadcast. And Karlie Kloss, the model, even apologized, even though she didn't really have any control over what outfit they put her in. And that was something that also then that kind of went viral, and there were lots of responses, and it started a lot of conversations about the sexualization of Native women and the problems of violence against women in Indian country. So then with mascots, there's been a ton recently. This was a horrible sign posted in Belton, Missouri. You can read it, I'm not even gonna read it out loud. Tons of Twitter outrage. Sonic ultimately contacted the owner of the franchise, and he had to undergo sensitivity training, and there was an apology and all sorts of stuff. And it was quick, that was really fast too. We were listening to A Tribe Called Red on at the start. Ian, who is also known as DJ Indian, engaged in a really long fight with a local Pee Wee football team up in Canada that was named the R word. And he really credits social media with helping him in that campaign and that process to get the word out and to get the pressure up, and they ultimately changed the name. They're the Eagles now, I think. And in that time period, the iTunes store in Canada also started censoring the R word. And Ian really thinks that that had to do with all of the activism around the local team. And most recently, there's been some really awesome stuff going on with the hashtag #NotYourMascot. And this was something that during the Super Bowl, we were trying to get it trending so we could counteract the images of the team in Washington and all of those. And it actually ended up trending. It's the fifth one down up there. I know it's kind of hard to see. That was somebody doesn't know how to take a screenshot, so that wasn't me. I know how to take a screenshot. Somebody else held up their phone and took a picture of the screen, which is one, but it's on there. So I also wanted to highlight a little more deeply one of the really cool things that's been happening that Jessica and I were really involved in, which is the Paul Frank collaboration. So this image comes from the invitation for a party that Paul Frank had in 2012 called Dream Catchin' with Paul Frank, a powwow celebrating fashions night out. And Jessica, being the industrious writer that she is, has a Google alert for Native American and fashion and got this in her email. So it kind of started, and then looked on Facebook, and there were over 1,000 images like this of people dressed up in war paint and feathers and playing Indian. They had this runway where people were mock scalping and mock beheading each other, and they had a bar that had drinks named like the Rain Dance Refresher and the Neon Teepee and that kind of stuff. So it was just a mess, and there were over 1,000 photos. So the community kind of mobilized. So I wrote a blog post called Paul Frank Offends Every Native Person on the Planet with Fashions Night Out, Dream Catchin' Powwow. Jessica also wrote a post more succinctly called Paul Frank's Racist Powwow. It got picked up by Indian Country, Jezebel, Huffington Post. There were hundreds of comments on Facebook and on Twitter. And then all of a sudden, like a couple of hours after all this went up, Paul Frank released an apology. They took down all the images, and we kind of thought like, oh, okay, well that's a win. And then Jessica and I got emails from the CEO of Paul Frank, Ellie Deckel, and he wanted to talk with us. And what the result of that conversation was, we built this collaboration with 4 Native designers who were able to design pieces for Paul Frank, but using their own aesthetics, their own community, their own styles to show people what real Native design looks like when we're allowed to represent ourselves. And here are some of the products, and I think one of our designers is somewhere in the audience too. So they were really cool and kind of incorporate the regional differences between the tribes and the communities too. There's our 4 designers. And then this was really cool. This was at Santa Fe Indian Market when we did our big release. I just saw this guy walking by, and he had just gone and bought Dustin Martin's shirt from the collaboration because he thought it looked cool. And we had a whole conversation about like where it came from and the collaboration, and he really just had picked it up because he thought it was a cool looking shirt. So to me, that was really exciting that this dude who has no affiliation to the whole process and the whole collaboration just thought the shirt was awesome. And that's I think the goal, that's really what we want, is to people to be able to incorporate Native fashion but do it right and allow Native people to represent themselves. So speaking of allowing Native people to represent themselves, I wanted to give a couple of positive representations as well, because I think I in particular get accused of just sort of like sitting and complaining about everything all day and saying like, this is bad, I don't like that, that's racist. And so I wanted to show, because when I started the blog, it was really, that's what it was for. It was to catalog these misrepresentations. But there are some amazing positive things coming out of new media as well. Like just for example, the 1491s had this really cool Represent campaign that was mostly college students, Native college students, and they were just these cute little quick humorous things about the ways they incorporated their culture into their everyday experiences. And they made it an open source project. So they wanted other people to make their own Represent videos. How do they incorporate their culture into their everyday lives? And it's really awesome and really powerful to create those counter narratives. So these are real contemporary Native people that don't look like that image of the Indian on whatever I showed you first. And then also, most recently, Matika Wilbur has this amazing project called Project 562, which is cataloging photos of Native folks from all the federally recognized tribes. And in addition, she's also taking oral histories from everyone that she photographs and talks with. And both Jessica and I are lucky enough to be a part of the project. And to me, it's just so powerful to be able to reframe those stereotypical images and show us how we really are and let us represent ourselves. So my last thing is I kind of crowdsourced my presentation. I went on Facebook, I went on Twitter, and I asked folks who read the blog, why is this important to you? Why is this work in representations, this pushing back on stereotypes, what are we doing here and why is it important? So basically I had other people do the work for me. And then being a researcher, I coded across those responses and pulled out kind of 3 themes. And the first was, this work is creating a global community of Indigenous activists and allies. So just a few years ago, I couldn't sit down at my computer and be in immediate contact with a fellow activist in Canada or someone, an Indigenous activist in Australia or New Zealand, or even just someone from another tribe or another community, or people who are living out in the communities while I'm off in grad school. But social media has really broken down a lot of those barriers and those false boundaries and everything, false borders between us. And a quote from someone on Facebook that I thought or Twitter that captured it was that this work has created a transnational community that calls for accountability and questions dominant ideas about right of cultural access. So I thought that summed it up pretty well. The next piece is about creating vocabulary and resources and support when you want to speak out and when you want to challenge these images. And I think there's an expectation that as Native people, we can look at it and be like, that is really hurtful to me, but then there's also an expectation that you can coherently and perfectly articulate why. And that's not something that we're ever taught. And so I think the work that goes on in this arena is able to create vocabulary and resources that people who might not feel confident or comfortable, like even me, speaking out, are able to turn to the online resources, maybe send them to someone, read them, and gain that vocabulary. And someone on Facebook said that it's giving the language on how to articulate themselves. She was talking about Native students in college, how to articulate themselves or how to hold an argument on misrepresentation. The hardest part about finding your voice when you're confronted by ignorance, racism, etc., is how to respond in that moment or later when you've been reflecting on it. And then finally, I feel like it's creating challenges to deeper issues of white privilege, colonialism, and power. So it might look like we're debating baking soda, but the reality is that these images are so representative of the deeper issues around white privilege and colonialism and power. And so these images offer an entry point to those conversations. And even for me, it's been such a learning experience to be able to say, yeah, that image is problematic, not just because it's a stereotypical representation of my people, but because that is a vestige of colonialism, and we need to interrogate that, and we need to move past that. So someone on Facebook said, it helps me as a settler recognize my privilege and begin to understand how to be an effective ally. So much of being a settler entails the desire to appropriate indigeneity. So with that, I will wrap it up and turn it